What if your entire life was just labor? We're talking sunrise to collapse, not 9 to 5. You didn't have proper tools, no proper pay. All you had was someone watching you and a whip at your back if you slowed down. And if you stop moving, you disappear. Ancient Egypt wasn't built by choice. It was built by broken bodies and buried names. And now ask yourself, how many days could you work before your spine gave out? And what happens when even that's not enough? Now it's not like the ancient Egyptians woke up one day and decided to chase dreams of becoming farmers or stone cutters. No, they were obliged to. About 90% of the population worked the land, and they worked it hard. Days kicked off before sunrise. They didn't stop until the sun went down. But that's not all. Water had to be carried and transported. Fields had to be plowed. Seeds had to be planted. Harvests had to be gathered. All by hand. They didn't have tractors or machines. All they had was muscle. If you had a donkey, great. If not, congrats. You were the donkey. And forget weekends. That concept didn't exist. Time off wasn't really a thing. The only real break came during the Nile flood, when the fields turned into giant muddy bathtubs. But even then, people didn't rest. Instead, they got drafted. Canals needed digging. Stones needed moving. After all, monuments didn't build themselves. So, yeah, the work didn't stop. It just changed gears. We actually have texts from that time that spell this out. One of the more famous ones is called the Satire of the Trades, which is, honestly, ancient sarcasm at its finest. It's a father talking to his son. The message? Become a scribe, or your life is going to be terrible. He paints a miserable picture of men being dragged to work sites, beaten by supervisors, broken by endless labor. At one point, he talks about a builder. His apron was literal rags. His arms were numb from hammering. He eats with his fingers and bathes once a day. If he's lucky. It sounds dramatic, but bones don't lie. Archaeologists have found skeletons in workers' villages. Worn-out joints, twisted spines, broken bones that never healed, that sort of thing. Mind you, these weren't weekend warriors. Their bodies were shaped by the job, and not in a good way. And no, this wasn't bad luck. This was state policy. You see, people paid taxes in grain. But, like we said, they also paid in labor. And yes, the government kept receipts. After every harvest, officials came by to take their cut. Usually 20%, sometimes more. Scribes logged every detail. How many bundles, who owed what, which village hit quota, and which fell short. If a village didn't deliver, the local leader took the heat. And we know this because it's literally painted on tomb walls, showing overseers with whips in hand, punishing headmen who came up short. So, when we say ancient Egypt was built by farmers, not only is it poetic, it's painfully literal. And by the Middle Kingdom, things got tighter. The tax system became more exact, more personal. No more collecting by village. Now, every individual got measured. Their land, their labor, recorded down to the last detail. Again, ancient Egypt's bureaucracy didn't miss much. It was everywhere. And scribes? They were everywhere twice. They moved from town to town, counting heads, tracking property, calculating how much grain you owed the state. Basically, if you were breathing, someone had written it down. Now, in some ways, this took pressure off local leaders. If a man couldn't pay, it was his problem, not the whole village's. A little more fair, maybe. But not by much. Every now and then, though, someone broke the mold. There's a record of one official who gave out grain during a famine. He even cancelled taxes after a bad harvest. Which is great, but also rare, as in, so rare they carved it in stone. Because usually, the state saw people less like neighbors, and more like fuel. Yeah, they weren't seen as individuals. They were resources, labor. And by the time we get to the New Kingdom, around 1500 to 1100 BC, Egypt had become a full-blown empire. And that meant more territory, more wealth, and of course, more building. Big building, massive temples. Tombs fit for gods. Whole cities, like Amana, rising from scratch. And all of it needed hands. And those hands came from everywhere. Yes, peasants were still being conscripted. But now, the state also used prisoners of war and enslaved people, especially for the worst jobs like mining gold and cutting stone in the desert. Jobs where the sun killed faster than the work did. Yeah, these sites were brutal. People didn't last long out there. And even the skilled workers had it rough. Take the artisans of Deir el-Medina. They were trained. They built the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. They worked directly for the state. So they had status, sure, but they lived on strict rations, tight schedules, no room to breathe. Then in 1159 BC, under Rameses III, things snapped. Their food delivery was 18 days late, so they walked off the job. They marched to a local temple and said plainly, "We are hungry." It was a protest, maybe one of the first organized strikes in recorded history. And no, these weren't rebels. They were basically government employees, respected artisans, and they were starving. That says a lot. The system looked stable, but in truth it really wasn't. All it took was a missed shipment of grain, and the whole thing started to wobble. Now, for most people in ancient Egypt, there was no ladder, no working your way up. So if you were born a farmer, then guess what? You stayed a farmer. Same job, same grind, passed down from parent to child, like a family curse with wheat. Sure, a few made it out, maybe through the army, or by sending a kid to scribal school. But those were rare, and when it happened, the state made a big deal out of it. To sell the system, not to celebrate them. And that's precisely what the satire of the trades was doing. Basically, be a scribe or suffer. And honestly, it wasn't lying. After all, scribes didn't carry bricks. They didn't carry water. They weren't out there in the fields, baking under the sun. Nope. They worked in the shade. They used words, not muscle. They gave orders instead of taking them. But let's be clear, almost nobody got that job. Over 99% of Egyptians weren't scribes. Again, they were the ones digging canals, lifting stones, planting fields, raising cities out of the dust. All the stuff Egypt is remembered for. Its monuments, its temples, its entire government. It all rested on their backs. And you know, it was baked into how they saw the world. You see, the Egyptians believed in Ma'at, a kind of cosmic balance, divine order. Everyone had a place, and for most people, that place was hard labor. From the moment you could walk until your body finally gave up. Kids worked the fields alongside their parents. There was no waiting until they were old enough. If you could hold a tool, you were old enough. And your body? It didn't hold out long. Malnutrition, infections, injuries, just exhaustion. They broke instead of retiring. During the late Old Kingdom, average life expectancy hovered somewhere between 25 and 35. So if you made it to 40, you were ancient, probably limping. Now just imagine it for a second. You're in the sun all day, carrying water, swinging tools and breaking rocks. Then someone tells you to speed up or face the consequences. So you go home completely drained and still owe grain to the state. Then you wake up and do it all over again. So, yeah, it's not exactly the glamorous Egypt from movies and textbooks, is it? But at the end of the day, back-breaking labor wasn't the only thing the pharaoh demanded. Sometimes, he wanted you on the front lines. Yeah, in another episode, we'll talk about how ordinary farmers got pulled from their fields and sent off to fight wars they didn't start. And when they came back, or if they came back, the fields were still waiting. The labor never ended. It just changed shape.